Ever feel like your project's a pop-up restaurant with no menu? The stakeholders keep ordering just one more thing, and your timeline and budget, well, that's melting quicker than ice cream at sprint planning. Hi everyone, it's Dave here, and welcome back to Project Management 101. With over 15 years experience delivering IT and software projects here in the UK, I help to break down project management into clear practical advice you can actually use. Today's topic is project scope, what it is, why it matters, and how to keep it under control. And make sure you stick around to the end. I've got a great downloadable checklist that'll help you gather scope much quicker. So first up, let's talk about what is scope. So what's the definition of scope? According to the Project Management Institute, scope is defined as scope is the full body of work needed to deliver your project's promised results. Features, functions, and deliverables and quality standards are all included. If I break that down, objectives are what success looks like. Deliverables are what we hand over to our customer. Boundaries are what's in and out of scope. Constraints such as time, cost, and people. And any assumptions we make, which are things that we consider that may be true. Defining scope properly sets the stage for planning, stakeholder alignment, and change control. It's your project's parameter. So up next, we're going to talk about scope baselining. So what is baselining? So now you've defined your scope, it's time to think about getting that agreed by everybody and forming what we call a baseline. This acts as the project's record, and it's the official version that we're aiming to deliver because we've agreed it with everybody. We typically pair this with the work breakdown structure. I'll cover this a little bit later in the video, and this forms part of the project initiation document, which I'll talk about in a separate video. I'm looking forward to that one. So baseline scope is like our blueprint in glass. If someone suggests a new task or deliverable, we should ask, was that part of the original plan? If not, welcome to change control. We can talk about this in a future video too. So using our baseline, it's going to start aligning our stakeholders, and this is a really important step within our scope. Even the best scope won't help if our stakeholders are on different wavelengths. Maybe your sponsor wants all the bells and whistles, maybe your client wants something lean and fast. If you skip alignment, expect friction, and don't forget the dreaded, that's not what I asked for. Some alignment rituals we can think about are things like kick-off meetings, where we pull together our stakeholders and walk through the project documentation end to end to make sure that everybody's in agreement. Scope walkthroughs, which are specifically focused on what's in and out of scope. Or documented scope sign-off. These are really important because they'll form part of your project overall documentation and be part of the baseline process. So we've talked about scope and we've talked about why it's important to baseline it. Now let's talk about scope creep. Even when the scope's locked in, danger lurks. It's around every corner. Scope creep is the quiet expansion of your project scope by sneaky little add-ins. Examples might be, how about just one more feature? Or maybe team-led tweaks without any discussion with anybody wider. How about unplanned deliverables mid-flight? It's like a zombie invasion. Once one gets in, more start banging on the door. Small changes start to stack up fast. So, how do we combat this? So how do you fight scope creep? You should refer to your project's documentation and the baseline version of the scope before you approve anything. You should keep a change control log of any change coming in and make sure you work with your wider stakeholders to ensure you get approval, appropriate budget and timeline added to your project overall. You should use the opportunity to communicate clearly the impact of time, cost, and capacity that you'll require to deliver the change and ensure that's recorded in the change control log. And if it's coming from the team, you should coach your team on change control discipline to ensure you don't get any hidden surprises. Your scope is like a perimeter fence. Guard it well, or you might face that zombie horde. As always, you know I like a little analogy to bring to life what we're talking about. This week's no different. So we're going to head out to order some food. I'm very clear on what I want to eat. For starter, we're going to order calamari. For a main course, we're going to order carbonara. And I'd quite like a lemonade to drink. So I've walked in, I've ordered my food, I'm very clear. I've got a food intolerance. I'm intolerant to lactose, so I make sure I tell the serving staff that, so I don't get a surprise. I've just defined what's in scope and what's out of scope. Up next, the staff turn up with some olives and some bread. Delightful, I think. I love olives and I love bread, and I tuck right in. I go through the meal, enjoying my calamari and my carbonara, and enjoying my lemonade on the side with my good company. I get to the end and the bill arrives. I check the bill and I find a charge for the olives and the bread that I didn't order, but I did eat. That's scope creep in real life, right there. Small extras, hidden costs. Is this familiar to you? That's scope creep. You didn't order it, but you're paying for it now. So, we've talked about what scope is, we've talked about how we might want to baseline it, and we've talked about what scope creep is. Now we're going to talk about how to actually capture scope. Scope typically lives inside the project initiation document. I did mention that earlier. And it's our job as a project manager to extract clarity from ambiguity. We do this by asking smart questions when we're at the project briefing stage. To help with clarity and ambiguity, you might want to ask questions such as, what does success look like for you, for your stakeholders, or for your customers? Are there any non-negotiables to the scope, to the time, and to the budget? Who are our decision makers and how do they want us to engage? Up next, we might want to dive into more scope specific questions. So what exactly is in scope and what isn't in scope? We should document those as in scope and out of scope. Do we have any assumptions baked in? Could be another question. Another question could be, do we have any constraints or exclusions already defined, or do we want to set some? The next section is around timeline and risk. We could ask, what is driving the timeline? i.e., have we got a deadline to meet? Maybe a legal compliance date, for example. Do we have a view on where previous similar projects have stumbled in our organisation? That might be a good question to ask. And we could set the scene up front. If there's any trade-offs needed, what do we flex first? What's the piece of scope that we're less worried about if something else was more important? That's a great question to ask. Then we can focus in on teams and delivery overall. So we could start with, who are the team that's going to work on this? Are they onboarded, or do I need to onboard them? Do we have a preferred delivery style for the project, such as waterfall delivery, i.e. Prince 2, agile delivery, maybe Scrum or Kanban, or maybe a hybrid of both? We could ask, are there any existing tools or processes that we should build on? If you're feeling really smart, here's a couple of bonus questions that you could ask. These will help you clear the fog a little bit more. So up first, if the project fails, what does failure look like to you? And then secondly, you could ask, what is the one thing that nobody mentions that always trips over a project in our organisation? These questions form part of your scope radar, and it'll allow you to spot any ambiguity before it starts to lead to confusion. So as mentioned at the start, here's the part that I'm excited to share. Make sure you pause the video when I pop this up on the screen. You'll be able to take a screenshot, save it digitally, and then use it in your daily lives to help make your project scope briefings much more successful. Let me know in the comments if it worked for you or any other ones that you'd add in. Thanks. So up next is work breakdown structure. Defining scope without breaking it down is like travelling without a map. The way to think of it is scope says what we're doing. Work breakdown structure describes how we're doing it. Work breakdown structure helps to break down our scope into deliverable pieces of work. This is where the vision becomes action. Maybe you could think of it as scope is your meal, but work breakdown structure is your shopping list. Together, they both anchor estimates and schedules, show stakeholders what's in and what's out of scope, help to block sneaky scope creep, and help to clarify ownership across teams. If scope is the what, work breakdown structure is the how, the who, and sometimes the where. So in our busy world, everybody's really busy all the time. So alignment isn't a one-time thing, it should be continuous. And when we work into baseline and manage change control and scope creep, it's really key that we continue to be aligned with our stakeholders and project sponsors throughout the life cycle of the project. Having a clear scope and work breakdown structure allows you to execute those early stages of the project to a clear and proper baselining. Next time you're kicking off a project, think like that restaurant. Know what's on your menu, know what's not on the menu, and don't let anybody sneak in some extra sides. I'd love it if you dropped your scope questions or scope stories in the comments. I'd love to read them. Like and subscribe for more practical tips in project, program and delivery management. From chaos to clarity. I'll see you next time. Take care.